None are as well known throughout the Nine Realms for their ability to craft masterful weapons and armor with the utmost levels of ingenuity and creativity than the dwarves of Svartalfheim. Many from these lands have forged their own legacies and tales of infamy within the Nine Realms. For example, the alchemist Ivaldi, who transformed the entire realm of Niflheim from a realm of wind, snow, and ice into a barren land of cursed mist. Or maybe Andvari, an enchanter who sought to domesticate and enslave the ancients for the use of work, only to end in catastrophe as Andvari was torn to pieces by his creations, with the only chance for escape being to bind his soul to a ring. But of course, there were two other dwarves who sought to make an even bigger name for themselves after refusing to settle as relatively unknown blacksmiths for the rest of their days. And make a name for themselves, the brothers did indeed. The names Brok and Sindri will forever be associated with the fate of all Nine Realms, as the two went on to craft the very tools that will influence the results of Ragnarok itself. The foul-mouthed, ill-mannered Brok and his polite, well-meaning brother Sindri began work on crafting a hammer for the Aesir god Thor, after Sindri had the bright idea to do so as a way for the brothers to become famous. However, the two most certainly overdid it when it was all said and done, and Thor eagerly awaited the gifting of his now finished and deadly hammer. With the completion of Mjolnir, Brok and Sindri had earned the favor of Odin and the Aesir, along with the fame that they had always desired. But with fame and legend came the beginning of a rift between the brothers' relationship. As the years went on, Brok and Sindri could only look on in horror as their creation delivered swift destruction and genocide upon the peaceful Jötnar of Midgard, among many other atrocities. The guilt ate away at Sindri to the point he felt that Brok and himself were solely responsible for Thor's rampage. And so Sindri managed to convince Brok that the two now had a duty to uphold and restore the balance of power across the Nine Realms. Rather than harnessing the power of lightning for their new weapon, the brothers intended to use the power of ice and infuse their creation with the echoing screams of, give or take, 20 frost trolls. The weapon to oppose the might of Thor and Mjolnir was dubbed as Leviathan. The axe was made specifically for the guardian of the Jötnar, the renowned warrior Laufey the Just. Though Laufey fought with grace and tenacity to bring an end to the tyranny of Odin and the Aesir, victory was never achieved. The work that Brok and Sindri put into making things right seemed to be all but in vain, and the rift between them only continued to expand. The guilt of the chaos that Thor had brought upon the realms was now too much, and so the brothers split their now infamous brand and went their separate ways. Brok and Sindri are both shrouded in mystery and both happen to be rather eccentric. As for the origin of their eccentricities, there are several different conflicting tales. For example, Sindri has claimed that Brok's blue skin simply came from working with silver metals barehanded, and that Sindri's own germophobia and fear of even touching others stemmed from an encounter with a Vanir witch, who used her magic to show Sindri the magnitude of the microscopic germs and bacteria that constantly live and thrive on our bodies, or as he calls, beasties. What actually occurred is a lot more grim of a tale. While forging the Leviathan axe, Brok was bitten by a very poisonous spider, which killed him where he stood. Sindri quickly loaded Brok's body onto a cart and set off for Alfheim, specifically to the Lake of Souls, the last stop before one would find themselves in Helheim. If Sindri didn't make it in time, Brok would be lost forever. After putting one of Brok's sacred smithing gloves onto his own hand, Sindri dove into the black water, immediately feeling drawn to a pale blue spirit. The closer Sindri got to the bottom of the lake, the closer he ventured towards danger. Nearing the spirit, Sindri was grabbed around the ankle by a rotting and bony hand. While turning to try to free himself, Sindri could see hundreds of rotting corpses buried in the sands at the bottom of the lake, all of them flailing their arms to grasp at the only living thing there. Sindri managed to free himself from the corpse that had a grip on him, and finally grabbed the spirit he had gone through so much trouble to get to. This triggered an explosion of blue light, and the blast kept the ever-approaching legion of the dead at bay long enough for Sindri to escape. Upon emerging from the Lake of Souls, Sindri felt a cold, itchy sensation come over his body, and felt as if the dead were still grasping at him and that bugs were boring into and infesting his skin. Nevertheless, Brok was now once again alive, albeit a bit on the blue side. As a result of this, Sindri is the dwarf that we know today. And Brok is none the wiser, as Sindri felt that the knowledge of this journey was his burden to bear alone. The story of these brothers fits the tragic end that is shared between the most legendary figures with self-interest as the only motive in mind. However, the tale of Brok and Sindri wasn't quite over like the two may have believed it to be. As Brok continues to travel from one of his makeshift forges spread throughout the realms to another, and as Sindri works diligently on making repairs to the gondola at the base of the tallest peak in Midgard, a father and his son are beginning to set out on a journey of legend, with the Leviathan axe, and perhaps the last chance of redemption for Brok and Sindri, in hand.
Come. No looking back now.